Stigma to me is where people are frightened of something and they don't know what to call it. Stigma is insulting. Especially in the Midwest, it's more a conservative nature out here, and people tend to hide it. They say 1 in every 3 people has a mental health issue in the population. You know, and that's a lot of people.
Stigma. Fear of the unknown. Fear of knowing an unknown. I think that people, when they hear the word psychiatric or psychotropics, they think of Manson or, Lizzie Borden. They go to real extremes. A lot of people's attitude is, well, we always took care of things when we were growing up. Why can't you take care of it? Some things are out of your control.
A stigma, I believe, is a mark. After I got diagnosed, it's really funny because people treat you a lot differently. Yeah, some with empathy, some with pity, and some with oh, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole kind of thing.
Stigma to me is a judgment, a negative assumption about someone that colors your view negatively and I think discredits them as a person.
A stigma with mental illness is the hearing voices, the voices in your head, doing bizarre things. And sometimes employers, they've either heard or have had bad experience with people or have seen people on television, and that's the idea they have in their mind.
Stigma to me is attitudes, words, behaviors from other people. When I was a college professor, people who didn't even know me, but they saw the little ad in the paper that said I got my master's degree, would come up to me and say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And this is a small town, 3,000 people. And they had never spoke to me in all the years I'd lived there, but suddenly I had a master's degree and I was somebody. "Will you be in our personal invitation-only club? Would you serve on this committee?" That was fine. But when my illness got worse, then I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of acquaintances. People treated me like it would rub off. It won't rub off. Stigma to me is the fact that they turned their backs on me. Talk to be with.
Stigma is weird. It's you think you know who has mental illness and who doesn't. Well, that's not the case. And there are people who that are out there with mental illness that you work with that you don't even know. People with mental illness, I think, have a hard time fitting into society. It keeps them from getting a job, being a part of their community. One of the reasons is because of how mental illness is portrayed through the movies and on TV. Always, when you think of mental illness, you think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it's just not like that.
It hinders the development of the person as far as getting their problems solved, because the stigma, they don't want to be seen going into a social worker office or a therapy office or any of those type of things, or even into a hospital.
With a physical illness, if you become ill, say you take chemotherapy, people are very empathetic. But if it's a mental health issue and your medicine isn't working good and it shows up in your behavior, how tolerant are people of that? Not very.
Well, my grandmother said that her sister was dead, and then she knocked on the door in the 70s and said they discovered lithium, and here I am, and the whole family went, "I thought you said your sister was dead." And here she'd been in a mental hospital for years and years and years.
My rapport with people changed after I became diagnosed. And an example is, you know, people wouldn't want their kids to be around me. Like, people would, like, avoid me. Like, I would get in the elevator and then they'd walk away.
I think it was more my fear than anything else. What would people think of me? Because I could not handle life and I could not cope and I had to take a pill. I know of an individual who had that stigma happen to her and they just snubbed her right from the top and treated her less than. By seeing that, what happened with her, I kept myself guarded. Same thing happened.
I was reluctant to share it with people, my employer for one, because I thought they were going to think I was pretty crazy. But at the same time, I thought it was in my best interest, and trying to be an advocate for mental illness in the best interest of creating the awareness for that. You know, the more awareness that's created, the less the myth is going to be there, or the preconceived notion, or the stigma.
I'd be at the doctor's office. I'm sitting here, and the doctors are like right there talking about me as if I'm not there. Like, oh yeah, he's showing signs of this, and oh yeah, I noticed that too, and like so. I'm over here. I can hear you.
In dealing with school systems, trying to get people to understand that he's a whole person. Yes, he has some issues, but there's a whole nother going to meetings with people who are not well educated about his disorder, and having them look at you like you did something wrong as a parent, or judging you. I mean, I can't imagine what it feels like for him when people do that to me. It's very demeaning. It's very degrading. Having my son go through juvenile court and being locked up for some of the things that were more a result of his disability, even with letters from his psychiatrist, were very harmful. Very harmful.
The worst thing that ever happened to me when I was stigmatized. I was in the ICU, the intensive care unit of a major hospital in a major city in South Dakota. I was having trouble breathing. My heart was not beating normally, so they had me hooked up to machines. And I heard this arguing, and I woke up, and apparently the next nurse to come on shift was arguing with the male nurse who had just been with me that she didn't want to be with one of those kind of people. She thought I had no ears and no heart, because she said, I'll pay somebody to take my shift. I don't want to be with a person like that. They're kooky, you never know what they're going to do. I'll pay you double if one of you guys will stay an extra shift. And I'm sitting in there, my eyes are tearing up. I can barely breathe. My heart, the monitor keeps going on and off because my heart's stopping, and I'm thinking, what the hell is wrong with you, lady? And I don't think I'll ever forget that that person thought I was so scary or weird or worthless enough that she didn't want to take care of me.
Give them a chance, because if you give them a chance, you might find out that that person is not that normal.
To give people with mental illness the benefit of the doubt, rather than hearing the medication and how long they've been seeing the psychiatrist, talk to them as a human being and find out what's really going on.
Education. I noticed a lot of my nursing students, when we got into abnormal psych and they took that whole day of what's normal, that day changed a lot of their attitudes.
Put out as much information as you can about it. Make the public aware. When you learn and have awareness of something, you're not afraid. And I believe that will help take the stigma away.
I guess my role is to really try to educate the employer as best as possible. That it's not a scary thing.
We need to be, first of all, educated, tolerant employers, law enforcement, and judges, people in mental health facilities, people in positions of authority in our community that are to serve as role models. People need to be educated.
It does take a network of support from people that understand the illness and employers that are willing to understand the illness and what needs to be done to help people.
I think it's a bright future, but I think it's a long, long road.
Love, that's the answer. Love sometimes isn't fun, and love is a very hard thing to do. Sometimes love isn't, it's sometimes, it bears all things. It's a hard thing.
It's going to be hard, there's no doubt about it. But if we continually educate the people about it and so forth, if we could start at the grade school levels and work our way up. There's a program that takes puppets, and they take them in the school systems and they tell them about stigma, and through role playing and so forth, helps them out, and then they discuss it. And some of these kids will go home and discuss it with their parents too. And so it's a ripple effect that happens.
Well, I think it's important that it's in our schools and at a young age, because when kids learn that we're all the same, but we all have our differences, that they grow up in a more healthy environment.
It's harder to change people's attitudes when they're set, but when you can reach young people. The future generations need to experience it, be around people like us, and people their own age who have mental problems, and to learn about them, get to know what they like, what they don't like, and find out, hey, they're not that far from where I am, and they like computers too, or they like games too, and to hang with them.
Also with movies, I think people are getting a better view into lives with mental illness. The film industry has a better idea of what people with mental illnesses go through, where they're coming from, how they deal with their illness. And I think if it can be continue to be portrayed more positive, in a more positive light, that'll help with the stigma.
You can't judge a book by its cover. You have to open it up and look at the print on the page, not the white. Get to know that person. All that person basically wants to be is treated like a human being.
Don't judge a book by its cover. Read the pages of the book.
Stigma, a lot of it comes from ignorance and non-exposure, and we're taking care of that generation by generation. And so the exposure and the openness is going to help them have the support they need. And so I don't know if stigma will ever be totally gone, but I think it's going to go in the right direction. It's going to become rarer instead of a common thing.
There's already a lot going on for people with mental illnesses, their involvement in the community, and I think it's kind of like a ripple effect. If one person is willing to embrace another with mental illness, then it will ripple out. Another person will reach out, another person, and it'll continue to grow. That's where I think the future is going, and that is bright.
The future is looking very bright.